It started with the kind of knock that doesn't sound like a visitor. It sounds like a warning. A hard, metallic pounding that shook the wooden frame of our front door and sent the dogs barking like they could sense something wasn't right. I was halfway through splitting firewood when I heard it echo through the cold mountain air, 3 sharp bangs that didn't belong in our quiet little world. My wife, Erin, looked up from the table by the window, her coffee steaming beside the stack of federal case files she was reviewing on her laptop. "Who the hell is that at 6 in the morning?" she muttered, standing slowly, her instincts already shifting into that mode she never really left behind from her old life. Out here, on the edge of the Rockies, 40 miles from the nearest town, nobody just dropped by unannounced, especially not in uniforms. I wiped my hands on my jacket and peered out through the blinds, and what I saw made my stomach twist into knots. 3 men in dark tactical gear standing on our porch, badges glinting, sidearms visible, and one of them holding what looked like a clipboard. They weren't local deputies. I'd recognize those faces anywhere. These guys were strangers. "Morning!" one of them shouted through the door, voice booming. "We're with the HOA Enforcement Task Force. Step outside, sir." HOA Enforcement? I almost laughed out loud, but something about the way his hand rested on his holster told me this wasn't some HOA board visit about landscaping. Erin stepped up beside me, scanning their gear through the window, her eyes narrowing. "Those badges," she whispered. "They're fake. See the font? They didn't even spell enforcement right." My wife's detail-oriented mind caught what mine didn't. Her years in federal security had trained her to spot fraud faster than most people could blink. "Stay behind me," I told her, but she was already moving, calm and calculated, her robe barely swaying as she reached for the gun safe by the coat rack. "No," she said. "You stay calm and get the body cam running. I want every second of this recorded." The pounding resumed, harder this time. "This is your final warning," one of them barked. "You're in violation of HOA regulations, non-compliant fencing, unapproved modifications, and illegal vehicle storage. Step out or we'll have to take you in." I almost choked at how absurd it sounded. Our property was outside any HOA jurisdiction, registered federal land from Erin's service allocation. But the seriousness in their tone wasn't for show. They believed they had authority here, or worse, they were pretending to. I clicked on the recording device just as Erin pulled open the door. The sudden silence that followed was almost cinematic. The men froze mid-motion, clearly not expecting a woman in her 30s with that calm steel in her eyes and a government-issued Glock resting against her thigh. "You have 5 seconds to identify your commanding officer," she said, voice low but dangerous. "And if you say HOA, I'll assume you're impersonating law enforcement." The lead man faltered, clearly caught off guard, then tried to recover. "Ma'am, we're authorized to—" Erin raised her left hand slowly, and the second they saw the flash of that gold badge, all 3 of them stiffened. Federal Homeland Security, the same badge that had made cartel enforcers hesitate in the borderlands. "Oh," she said, tilting her head slightly. "You didn't expect your target to be federal clearance level, did you?" The color drained from their faces. One of them instinctively stepped back, his fake badge glinting in the sunlight, while another stammered something about just following orders. Erin's voice didn't rise. "Drop the props," she said, "and hands where I can see them." Her tone could freeze blood. They hesitated until she took 1 step forward, and that was enough. The first man dropped his weapon instantly. The second tried to bolt for the truck, but before he could start it, our cabin's security system, linked to a remote sheriff alert, activated a loud siren that echoed through the trees. "You're surrounded!" I shouted, playing into the illusion to keep them from panicking and doing something stupid. "Deputies are already on the way." They froze again, trapped between fear and disbelief. Erin didn't blink. "Who sent you?" she asked. The man still standing shook his head. We got a call," he said. "Said you 2 were violating HOA policy, building illegal structures." "From who?" she pressed, stepping closer. "Name." He swallowed hard. "President Karen Holloway." My jaw clenched so tight I could taste blood. "That woman again? The self-declared HOA president who'd been trying to annex our land for over a year, claiming the development needed our plot to maintain neighborhood uniformity. She'd sent letters, fines, even threats. But this was a new level. Fake police, illegal impersonation, armed trespassing. Aaron turned toward me slowly, eyes sharp. Record everything. We'll need this. Then, to the imposters, you're all under citizen's arrest under Title 18, Section 912, impersonating a federal officer. The look on their faces was priceless, the dawning horror that they weren't intimidating us. They were about to be indicted. Within minutes, the sheriff's sirens grew louder down the ridge, blue and red lights slicing through the pines. The three men didn't even try to run. They just stood there, stunned, as real deputies pulled up and took them down one by one. As they were cuffed, one of the officers called out to Erin, recognizing her immediately. "Agent Cross," he said. "Didn't expect to see you back up here." Erin smiled faintly. "Didn't expect to need to flash my badge on my porch," she replied, handing over the fake IDs. "Looks like someone's been busy." The sheriff nodded grimly, flipping through the counterfeit credentials. "These aren't amateurs. Whoever made these knew what they were doing." Erin glanced at me, her expression unreadable. "Karen's escalating," she said softly. "She's not just power-hungry anymore. She's dangerous." That night, after the deputies hauled the men away and the forest fell silent again, I found Erin sitting by the fire, her badge glinting faintly in the glow. "You think she's behind all of it?" I asked quietly. Erin didn't answer at first. Then she looked up, her eyes distant. "No," she said finally. "Karen doesn't have the brains or the connections for this level of operation. Someone else is backing her, and we're about to find out who." The wind outside howled, rattling the shutters, but it wasn't the cold that sent chills down my spine. Somewhere beyond those trees, someone had just declared war on us, and they'd made the mistake of thinking we'd go down quietly. The morning after the arrest, the mountain air felt different. Not colder, not sharper, but heavier, like the woods themselves were listening. Erin hadn't slept a minute. She sat by the kitchen window with a mug of untouched coffee, staring at the sheriff's report printouts scattered across the table. Each page was worse than the last. Fake HOA IDs, burner phones, prepaid license plates, all linking back to no one real. "Ghosts," she muttered. "Every trail ends in a dead server or a deleted record." I tried to lighten the mood, cracking eggs into a skillet, but even the sound of sizzling felt too loud in the tension. "You think Karen hired them?" I asked. Erin shook her head slowly. "Karen doesn't hire mercs," she whines to the county board. "Someone's feeding her resources." I'd seen that look before. The quiet calculation behind her calm demeanor when her brain shifted into investigation mode. Before she retired, Erin had handled internal federal operations, rooting out infiltration within law enforcement agencies themselves. So when she said this felt bigger than a suburban HOA dispute, I believed her. Around noon, the sheriff came by in his patrol SUV, the gravel crunching outside. "Got your impersonators locked up tight," he said as he stepped onto the porch, removing his hat. "But there's a problem." Erin turned, jaw tightening. "What kind of problem?" He hesitated, looking between us. "They posted bail 2 hours after booking. Cash. No ID, no record of who signed it. And they're gone." Erin's eyes narrowed to slits. "Gone where?" The sheriff sighed. "No clue. But we found something in their truck before impound. You'll want to see this." He reached into his coat and handed her a sealed evidence bag. Inside was a folded HOA violation notice, but not one of Karen's usual rants. This one was stamped with a gold seal, embossed with the letters Federal Neighborhood Integrity Division. I frowned. "That's not real, is it?" Erin's expression hardened. "No, but someone's trying to make it look like it is." She ripped open the bag and studied the font, the layout, even the paper type. "This is government-grade print stock," she said quietly. "Whoever's behind this has access to restricted materials." The sheriff looked uneasy. "What does that mean?" Erin exhaled. "It means this isn't just a crazy HOA president anymore. Someone's using her as a front." After he left, she called an old contact, Agent Monroe, her former field partner, through a secure line. I listened as her voice dropped into that tone she only used when things got serious. "Monroe, I need you to pull intel on a fake division calling itself the FNID. Cross-check with Homeland databases for unauthorized operations tied to civilian surveillance." There was a pause, then a static-filled sigh. "Aaron, I shouldn't even be talking to you off record," Monroe said. "But I'll look. This smells like a shell-op." Aaron hung up and looked at me grimly. "We're bugged," I blinked. "What?" She pointed to the wall-mounted light fixture above the dining table. "See the tiny reflection? That's not the bulb. It's a lens." My stomach dropped as she climbed on the chair, twisted the fixture, and pulled out a hidden micro-camera. "They were watching us," she said flatly. "Which means last night wasn't an ambush. It was a test." She dismantled the device with surgical precision, her hands steady. "They wanted to see how we'd react, and now they know." That night, we didn't stay at the cabin. Aaron insisted we pack essentials, guns, laptops, evidence drives, even the dogs, and moved to the old ranger station 2 miles downriver, a place still off-grid and harder to track. As we drove through the misty forest road, I couldn't shake the feeling we were being followed. Every crunch of gravel behind us, every glint of light through the trees felt deliberate. We reached the ranger station just before dusk, its weathered wood and overgrown porch offering a strange sense of safety. Erin checked the perimeter, scanning for signals with her handheld detector. "Clean," she said. "For now." Inside, we set up a command post of sorts, her laptop connected to a satellite uplink, my camera gear positioned to record every entrance. She started typing, lines of code filling the screen as she traced the digital origins of that FNID seal. "What are you hoping to find?" I asked. "A mistake," she replied. "People who fake federal agencies always leave one trace they can't hide, a registration number, a ghost IP, something small." Hours passed in silence, broken only by the low hum of her machine. Then she froze, eyes widening. "Got it." I leaned over her shoulder. On the screen was a data path, encrypted, routed through 5 proxy servers, ending at a real address. Tremont Holdings, LLC, Washington, D.C. Erin typed faster, her voice almost a whisper. "That's a shell company. I've seen it before. It's tied to a private security contractor we investigated back in 2018, Valor Shield International." The name rang a bell. "Didn't they get shut down for Black Ops surveillance?" "Supposedly," Erin said. "But if they're back, it explains everything. The fake IDs, the tactical gear, the professional setup. Karen's just the pawn. Valor Shield's running the board." I rubbed my temples. "But why us? Why a cabin in the middle of nowhere?" Erin leaned back, eyes distant. "Because this cabin sits on the only land in the region exempt from HOA jurisdiction and federal acquisition due to a Homeland Security deed. If Valor Shield's trying to build a private data relay here, they need this property. And they'll use whatever means necessary to scare us out." Her logic hit me like a punch. "So the fake cops were stage 1. She nodded grimly. "And now that failed, stage 2 will come next. Digital harassment, property seizures, smear campaigns. Classic destabilization tactics." Sure enough, the next morning it began. Our online accounts flooded with fake fines, HOA notices, property lien threats. Even local news ran a story titled, "Federal Couple Accused of Illegal Cabin Construction." They were painting us as criminals. "They're controlling the narrative," Erin muttered, scrolling through headlines. "And if they control perception, they can justify whatever comes next." She started drafting counter-reports, logging timestamps, cross-referencing documents. But before she could submit them, her laptop screen went black. "They're in," she said, cursing. "They hacked the system." Sparks of panic flickered in my chest. "Can you trace them?" "Already on it," she said, fingers flying. The laptop beeped, then rebooted. When the screen came back, a single message flashed across it. "Leave now. Final warning." Erin stared at it for a long moment, then smiled coldly. "They're scared. Good." She shut the lid. "Pack everything. We're moving again." We hiked out before dawn, heading deeper into the forest toward an old communications tower Aaron once used for field ops. But halfway up the ridge, we spotted movement. 3 SUVs parked near the trailhead, unmarked tinted windows. Aaron motioned for silence. "They're here already." We crouched low, moving through the brush as quietly as we could until we reached the old tower base. There, she pulled out her secure satellite phone. "Monroe, it's Aaron. They've escalated. We need a trace on Valor Shield's current contracts." Static. Then Monroe's voice, tense. "You're not going to like this. Valor Shield was reactivated last month under a federal subgrant from the Department of Urban Security. They're listed as subcontractors for community regulation enforcement." Aaron's face went pale. "They're privatizing HOAs." "Exactly," Monroe said. "You're sitting on a test zone. Your land's part of Phase 1. She swore under her breath. "That's illegal," Monroe sighed. "Not if it's classified." The line went dead. For a moment, the only sound was wind whistling through the tower. Aaron turned to me, jaw set. "We're not dealing with Karen anymore. We're up against the government's shadow side." That realization changed everything. We weren't just defending property, we were defending exposure of a nationwide scheme. "We need proof," I said. "Something undeniable." Aaron nodded, already climbing the ladder to the tower's control deck. "There's a data node up here still connected to the federal grid. If Valor Shield's running covert ops through HOAs, their test logs will be archived here." She accessed the terminal, typing command after command, the screen flooding with encrypted files. Then jackpot. "Got them," she said, smiling for the first time in days. "Operational Directive, Phase 1, Civilian Obedience Assessment, Lead Contractor, Valor Shield International, Local Proxy, Karen Holloway." My blood boiled. "They're experimenting on homeowners." "Exactly," she said. "Testing control measures disguised as neighborhood rules." She began downloading the evidence onto a secure drive. But suddenly, the screen flickered. "They found us," she hissed. "They're trying to wipe it remotely." She yanked the cable free just in time. "We've got maybe half of it, but it's enough to burn them." Then headlights appeared below the ridge, slicing through the fog. "Black SUVs, 5 this time." Aaron shoved the drive into her jacket. "Time to move." We bolted down the other side of the mountain, the sound of engines roaring behind us. "They're not giving up," I said between breaths. "No," Aaron said. "They're panicking." Shots cracked through the trees, warning rounds, but close enough to send bark flying. We dove behind a fallen log, catching our breath. "They can't risk killing us," she said, voice steady even under fire. "Not with federal clearance involved. But they'll try to capture us." I looked at her, at the determination in her eyes, and realized she wasn't afraid. She was calculating. "I'll draw them off," I said, but she grabbed my arm. "No, we stay together." She pulled out her phone, sending a coded text to Monroe. "Initiate Falcon Fall Protocol." "What's that?" I asked. "Insurance," she said. "If they take us out, the files auto-upload to national media." Her phone pinged, confirmation, then silence. The gunfire stopped. We peered over the log, but the SUVs were gone, engines cut. Aaron frowned. "That's not retreat, they're regrouping." She stood, scanning the ridge. Then a voice echoed from the woods. "Agent Cross! Hand over the drive and no one gets hurt." Aaron smirked. Classic bluff. She motioned for me to follow her to a narrow path that curved around the ravine. "There's an old mine tunnel ahead. We can lose them." We ran, hearts pounding, until the forest opened into a gaping black entrance. Inside, it smelled of rust and stone, our footsteps echoing through the dark. Aaron turned on her flashlight. "They'll sweep the surface first. We have 5 minutes, maybe less." We moved deeper until the tunnel split. "Left," she said, "always left." I trusted her instincts. Then came the rumble, SUV engines closing in overhead. "They're above us," I whispered. Aaron nodded. "Good. Let's keep them there." She pulled out a small device from her belt, a signal jammer, and activated it. The lights above flickered. Radios would be dead. "Now," she said, "we level the field." For the next hour, we maneuvered through the dark maze until finally we emerged through a side exit into the valley. Dawn was breaking, golden light spilling over the peaks. Erin looked exhausted but triumphant. "We've got what we need," she said, holding up the drive. "Now we end this." I stared at her, still catching my breath. "How?" She smiled faintly. "We're taking it to D.C. By the time we reached the outskirts of D.C., 2 days had passed, and both of us were running on caffeine, adrenaline, and the stubborn resolve that had kept us alive this long. Erin had driven through rain, fog, and one near collision with a semi that felt almost too coincidental to be random. Every mile brought more paranoia, cars that lingered too long in the rearview mirror, phones that flickered like they were tapped, unfamiliar faces at gas stations pretending not to stare. But beneath it all, Erin stayed focused, her hand never leaving the evidence drive tucked in her jacket pocket. "Once this goes public," she said quietly as we entered the city limits, "Valor Shield and every agency funding them will burn." I wanted to believe her, but I could already feel the invisible walls closing in. When we reached the underground parking lot of Monroe's Safe House, a bland office building near DuPont Circle, Erin parked the truck, scanned the surroundings twice, then nodded. No tails. The elevator ride up was silent, every creak of the cables sounding like a threat. Monroe opened the door before we even knocked. He looked older, grayer, and infinitely more nervous. "You two have no idea how deep this goes," he whispered, locking the door behind us. Erin handed him the drive. "Then show me." He led us to a back room filled with monitors, surveillance feeds, and encrypted servers. "After you called," Monroe said, "I ran Valor Shield's financials through a federal backend. They're laundering money through HOA management firms, thousands of them." "You were right. This isn't about neighborhoods, it's about jurisdiction. They're turning HOAs into enforcement proxies under private contracts. It's social control disguised as local governance." Erin's jaw clenched. "And the pilot zone?" "You're ground zero," Monroe said. "Your land deed's the only one left that blocks their full jurisdiction map. They can't complete Phase 1 without it." He plugged in the drive, and the files spilled across the screens. Directives, communications, even video footage of the fake officers' training sessions. Erin leaned closer, recognizing the insignia on their gear. "They even branded them as HOA police," she said bitterly. "All for plausible deniability." Monroe nodded grimly. "They call it civil obedience restructuring. They're planning to expand nationwide by the end of the fiscal year." Before Erin could reply, the monitors flickered, then went black. Monroe's face drained of color. "They found us." The next moment, the building lights cut out and the faint hum of a generator died in the silence. "Backup servers just got hit," Erin said, already moving. "Grab everything and go." But before we could reach the door, the sound of boots echoed down the hall, heavy, organized. "Federal agents?" I asked hopefully. Erin shook her head. "No, private." She drew her weapon, pressed her back against the wall, and mouthed, "Stay low." The door burst open in a spray of splinters. 4 men in black gear stormed in, rifles raised. Erin fired first, controlled shots, precise, aimed at their armor joints. One went down, the rest ducked for cover. "Go!" she shouted, covering me as I dashed toward the server rack. Monroe yanked the drives free, shoving them into a duffel bag. "Stairwell's clear," he yelled. We ran, smoke filling the corridor from flashbang residue. The sound of boots followed us down the stairwell, bullets ricocheting off the rails. Erin returned fire, methodical even while descending. On the 4th floor, she kicked open a side door, leading into a maintenance corridor. "This way!" she barked. We burst through a service exit into the alley where Monroe's car, a nondescript black sedan, was waiting. We piled in, tires screeching as we sped off. Erin's breathing was steady, but her hands shook faintly on the gun. "They're not letting us leave the city," she said. "They'll shut down every route." Monroe nodded grimly. "I know somewhere they won't look." He took a sharp turn into an old underground tunnel, one of the forgotten service routes built beneath D.C. during the Cold War. "Used to be a communications line," he explained. "Now it's just dust." As the car's headlights cut through the darkness, Erin glanced at the rearview mirror. "You trust me, Monroe?" "With my life," he said. Then don't stop driving. She opened her phone, initiating another encrypted upload, this time to a dead-drop cloud link. We can't hold physical copies, she said. They'll trace the bag. Won't that risk exposure? I asked. She looked at me, eyes fierce. That's the point. For 10 minutes, we drove in silence, the tension thick enough to choke on. Finally, Monroe stopped near a sealed steel door. End of the line. We climbed out. Erin inspected the door. It bore an old Homeland seal, half faded but still official. Perfect, she murmured. She scanned her badge. The door clicked open. Inside was a small, dimly lit chamber filled with obsolete tech. Servers, consoles, dusty terminals. This was part of an emergency broadcast system, she said. Still connected to legacy networks? If I can route the data through here, it'll ping every media outlet on the East Coast before they can shut it down. Monroe raised an eyebrow. You're gonna leak classified intel to the press? Not classified, Erin corrected. Criminal. She inserted the drive and began typing commands, the hum of the old machinery filling the space. Come on, she whispered, as data packets raced across the screen. Then, just as the final upload bar hit 95%, the console froze. They're counter-hacking, she said. Manual override. She reached into her jacket, pulled a smaller drive from a hidden pocket, and jammed it into the port. Fail-safe, she muttered. I wrote this code myself. The console beeped once, and the upload completed. Across hundreds of terminals nationwide, Valor Shield's entire operation was suddenly exposed. Contracts, recordings, internal memos. It was all live. Erin exhaled, relief flashing in her eyes for the first time. It's done, Monroe smiled faintly. You just started a war. But before we could celebrate, the tunnel shook. Explosion? I shouted. Erin's expression darkened. No breach. The steel door behind us dented inward with a metallic groan. They're cutting through, Monroe said, panic creeping in. Erin holstered her weapon and pulled me behind a concrete column. Listen, she said firmly. If we don't make it, you find the press. You show them the files. We're all making it, I said stubbornly, but she gave me that look, the one that said she'd already accepted the worst. Promise me, she whispered. The door burst open, flames licking the edges as smoke poured in. Valor Shield operatives stormed the chamber, shouting commands. Erin opened fire, precise as ever, but they kept advancing. Monroe was hit, dropping the bag of drives, but Erin grabbed it before it hit the floor. Move! She yelled. We sprinted deeper into the tunnels, the sound of pursuit echoing like thunder. Erin stopped at a junction, turned, and fired one last burst that brought the ceiling down between us and them. The dust settled, silence falling heavy. They'll dig through that in minutes, I said. Erin nodded. Then we make minutes count. We climbed a narrow ladder that led to a maintenance hatch. When she pushed it open, daylight poured in, blinding, almost heavenly. We emerged in the shadow of the Lincoln Memorial, tourists oblivious to the chaos below their feet. Erin tucked the drive inside her jacket and took my hand. Time to disappear, she said. For the next 24 hours, we moved through the city like ghosts, changing clothes, using cash, avoiding cameras. The news was everywhere. Private military firm implicated in HOA policing scandal. Erin's face wasn't shown, but the leaked footage of her confrontation at the cabin had gone viral. She watched it in silence at a cafe, sipping stale coffee. You did it, I said softly. We did it, she corrected, a faint smile touching her lips. But her eyes held something else, unease. They'll come for retribution, she said. You don't humiliate people with billions in funding and walk away untouched. I tried to reassure her, but deep down, I knew she was right. Even as we left D.C. that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that the story wasn't over. Because sometimes when you expose the truth, it doesn't set you free. It just paints a bigger target on your back. And Erin Cross had just made herself the most dangerous target in America. The next morning broke an eerie silence, the kind that feels less like peace and more like the pause before something terrible happens. And the cabin, though sturdy and built to outlast the mountains themselves, suddenly felt like a hollow shell of tension. Marissa hadn't slept all night. She'd sat by the table, staring at her badge, the glint of gold reflecting the flicker of the dying fire. Her mind running loops through every possible angle of what had happened and what was about to. I brewed coffee in the iron pot, but even the smell of it couldn't cut through the weight that hung in the air. When she finally looked up, her eyes were sharper than I'd seen them since she joined the bureau. "They weren't just testing us," she said flatly. "They were testing our response time." That's when I realized the truth. Those fake HOA cops hadn't meant to capture her, not yet. They'd meant to trigger something bigger, a signal to whoever was backing them that the people in the cabin weren't normal civilians. Maybe we'd scared them off, maybe not, but the storm hadn't cleared. It had only shifted. Around 9, a black SUV appeared at the bottom of the gravel drive, moving slow and deliberate through the mist. I almost reached for my rifle before I saw the plates, federal issue. 3 men and a woman stepped out, all armed, all wary, scanning the tree line before nodding toward the cabin. Marissa opened the door before they knocked. The lead agent, a tall man with a scar running through his eyebrow, gave her a look that was both respect and unease. "Agent Cross," he said, "you've got one hell of a mess brewing up here." She didn't flinch. "Tell me something I don't know." They set up a mobile station inside, unpacking laptops, comms, and tactical maps while I tried to keep up with what was happening. The bureau team had traced the imposters' HOA IDs to a shell company registered under a name we'd heard before, Cedar Ridge Management, and beneath that, a web of real estate firms used to launder money from illegal federal land seizures. The HOA thing was a perfect cover. Nobody questions an HOA fine. Nobody questions their authority when they flash a badge that looks official enough. And by the time someone calls the county clerk, it's too late. But what chilled me wasn't how deep it ran. It was how close it hit. Cedar Ridge owned parcels all around us, and our cabin, technically, was sitting right on the fault line between private and public land. They wanted us gone not because of HOA control, but because the basement of our property, built decades ago by the previous owner, hid a decommissioned radio relay bunker from the Cold War. Still operational, still capable of intercepting encrypted frequencies. Someone wanted that equipment wiped before federal eyes landed on it. The imposters hadn't been random thugs. They were there to recover a shipment hidden below the relay floor. I watched as Marissa and the team pried open the old metal door beneath the rug in our living room. Rusted steps led down to the bunker, smelling of oil, dust, and something old enough to hum with history. Down there, in the glow of a single flickering bulb, was a steel crate, half buried under dust sheets. They cracked it open, and the inside gleamed with military-grade signal equipment, handwritten coordinates taped to one side. One of the agents let out a low whistle. "This tech predates modern encryption. If they've been using it, it's off-grid, untraceable." Marissa's face hardened. "That means they've been listening to us longer than we knew." A sudden hiss filled the air. A static burst from the comms unit they'd brought. The signal scrambled, flickered, and then a voice, distorted and calm, broke through the interference. "You should have stayed out of it, Agent Cross." Her hand went for her sidearm instantly. "Trace that!" she barked, but the tech just shook his head. "The source is local. Less than 2 miles." She looked at me, and I knew we were both thinking the same thing. Those men hadn't left. They'd regrouped. Before anyone could react, the sound of tires skidding on gravel sliced through the silence outside. The SUV parked down the drive exploded in a shower of fire and smoke, the shockwave shaking the glass from the windows. The team dove for cover as the cabin lights flickered and died. Smoke poured through the trees, and through it came 3 silhouettes, dark, moving fast, carrying rifles with suppressors. "Positions!" someone shouted, but the gunfire drowned the rest. Marissa pulled me behind the heavy oak counter as bullets punched holes through the wood. "They're trying to destroy the evidence!" she yelled. She grabbed her comm unit and spoke through the chaos. "Federal agents under fire. Need immediate support. Coordinates 41.8739 N." Another explosion cut her off. This one from the side of the cabin. Shards of glass and splinters flew across the room. I reached for the rifle I'd stashed by the door, checked the chamber, and crawled toward the window. Through the haze, I saw the imposters moving in coordinated formation. too precise for hired guns. These were trained operatives, maybe ex-military, definitely professional. The lead one raised a grenade launcher. I didn't think, I just fired. The shot caught him in the shoulder, spinning him to the ground. Marissa surged up, firing 2 clean shots that dropped another. The last one fled toward the tree line, disappearing into the fog. The silence afterward was deafening, broken only by the sound of the fire crackling from the wrecked SUV. The team scrambled outside, weapons drawn, checking the perimeter. No more attackers, just the forest, drenched and smoking, as if it too was holding its breath. The agent with the scar turned to Marissa. "They knew our response time," he said grimly. "Someone fed them intel from inside." She didn't answer. Instead, she walked to the edge of the clearing, where the body of the man I'd shot lay half buried in mud. She knelt beside him and pulled the mask from his face, and froze. I saw her expression change from fury to shock. "That's not possible," she whispered. The face staring up at her was one she knew, an ex-partner from her bureau days, presumed dead in an operation years ago. The scar across his jaw confirmed it. Betrayal was never clean, never simple. When the backup finally arrived, real federal SUVs this time, with blinking lights cutting through the mist, the sun had begun to rise over the ridge. Smoke curled lazily into the morning air. The agents took statements, secured the scene, loaded the crate and the bodies, and promised a full internal probe. But even as they drove off, I knew neither of us would sleep easy again. Marissa stood at the porch, the badge glinting in her hand, her reflection caught in the burned hood of the SUV. "They'll bury this," she said softly. "They'll call it a rogue group, close the case, and move on." I put a hand on her shoulder. "Then we don't let them." She turned to me, eyes tired but alive with that stubborn fire I fell in love with. "You realize what that means, right?" I nodded. "It means we build our own case," and so we did. In the months that followed, we quietly pieced together files, interviews, digital traces, all leading to one undeniable truth. The Cedar Ridge Network wasn't just about land or money. It was about silence, silencing anyone who lived over the wrong secret. And we had just blown it open. The night they came for us, they thought they were snuffing out a threat. Instead, they exposed a storm they could never contain. Somewhere deep in the Bureau archives, there's a report stamped, "Classified, Federal Eyes Only," about a failed operation in the mountains. It lists casualties, missing evidence, and one anonymous informant who vanished without a trace. But if you ever drive through that region and see a cabin standing alone by the lake, smoke curling gently from its chimney, know this: the people inside aren't just resting. They're watching. And if the fake cops, or anyone wearing the wrong badge, ever comes back, they won't be leaving this time.